All right. Welcome to the Richard L. Thompson Lecture Series, where 6 of Thompson's books will be covered chapter by chapter, with a lecture summarizing the contents and highlighting the chapter's essential messages, followed by a discussion session. In the previous session, Krishna Narasimha Devdas, gave a presentation on Vedic Cosmography and Astronomy. That's this book right here. Chapter 2, Vedic Physics, the Nature of Space, Time, and Matter. Today, for the presentation on Chapter 3, which is called Vedic Cosmography, I would like to introduce Prishni Sutton, who is a BA in Mathematics and currently serves as Secretary and Treasurer for both the Bhaktivedanta Institute for Higher Studies and the Richard L. Thompson Archives. And I am going to throw it over to Prishni.
Thank you very much, Christina, for lecture series, and I want to thank you all for coming. As Christina said, we're working on Sadhuputa's first book on Vedic cosmology called Vedic Cosmography and Astronomy. He was one of the founding members. He was one of the founding members, as you all know, of the Bhaktivedanta Institute in 1976. And at that time, Srila Prabhupada gave the Institute the job of building a model for the fifth canto for the Temple of the Vedic Planetarium. So Sadhuputta said it shortly after that. He said, we had no idea how to begin. And it took some time, but 13 years later, and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, Sadhuputta was able to produce this book, Vedic Cosmography and Astronomy. I'm speaking on chapter 3, which is called Vedic Cosmography. And I think this is a real pivotal chapter because in this chapter, you're going to see as we go through it, he gives kind of, I think, the foundation of how he proposes to approach the topic, because that's what he struggled with for all these years. How do you even approach this topic? So we'll get started. I'm going through it sequentially, and we're just going to go through it bit by bit. So he begins the chapter with this famous quote. It's the quote that Sadhuputta uses by far more than any other quote from Prabhupada in his works. And this is Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 5, canto 5, chapter 16, verse 4. And this is Shukadev Goswami speaking to King Parikshit. My dear king, Parikshit has asked him to describe the universe in the previous verse, and he replies, my dear king, there is no limit to the expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead's material energy. This material world is a transformation of the material qualities, yet no one could possibly explain it perfectly, even in a lifetime as long as that of Brahma. Now, Brahma's lifetime, as you may recall, is 311 trillion years. And just to give you an idea how big that number is, if you live for 10,000 lifetimes, average human being, 10,000 lifetimes, total number of seconds you lived would be approximately 300 trillion years, 300 trillion seconds. So 300 trillion is an enormous amount, and even that is not enough to understand. So we go in, we approach the Bhagavatam in that mood. Let me see if I can understand some small amount. Not that you go in, I'm going to get a full grasp on this. So Sadhuputta proposes to show the relationship between this Vedic picture and the universe of our experience, our observations, drawing from the 3 following sources. Let me go back up here. I have pictures of the sources. So one is the writings of Srila Prabhupada. Here's the canto right here. The other source he's going to use is other traditional Vedic literature on the topic. And the first go-to, of course, is Surya Siddhanta and the Siddhanta Shiromani. These works were translated by Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati into Bengali, and then we have English translations from Bengali. We also have versions done straight from the Sanskrit. And he wants to then correlate all this into Western thought. And here's a picture. This is the book done by Yogeshwar's brother, Byron Green, The Elegant Universe, very famous superstar in science, actually. Okay, so we're going to look at these 3 sources, and his main job that he really wants to do in this, his strategy, is to present the simplest world picture that's going to harmonize both the writings of Srila Prabhupada with modern Western science. And this assumption he makes is extremely important, so keep this in mind always. His assumption is that the Bhagavatam gives a direct and valid account of the universe. That's the starting point in all of Sadhuputta's work. And that's the long and the short of it. He assumes the Bhavatam gives a direct and valid account of the universe. Okay, so where do we go? So we begin, we're looking at the universe as described in the Srimad Bhagavatam, fifth canto, and the first thing you see, the most striking feature, is this enormous Bhumandala plane. Okay, it's described as a flat disk. It's got a diameter of 4 billion miles, which you know, if you're an astronomer or you know a little bit about science, you'll know that's just about exactly the orbit of Uranus, a little bit past the orbit of Uranus. So that tells you something right there. But the interesting thing, of course, is the way it's marked with all these various rings. And he doesn't get into that in detail in this chapter, but we have and we'll go into it in a little bit of detail later on. But the thing I want you to notice here is that Sariputta generally translates Bhumandala, refers to it as the earthly planetary system. And if you look up in, at least when I look in, I've looked in the database a lot on this, and you'll see Prabhupada often uses that phrase also, Bhumandala translated as the earthly planetary system. So that's something we also have to keep in mind. Okay. Now, in the discussions and the descriptions of Bhumandala, very interestingly, it's all done with geographic language, talking about things of geography, mountains, rivers, oceans, trees, islands, all this. But it's not ordinary geography, because if you look at the sizes, they're enormous. Smallest mountains described in Bhumandala are 16,000 miles tall. The dividing mountains like the Himalayas and those are 80,000 miles. And then we get to Mount Meru, it's 672,000 miles high. Oh, this is enormous. Trees in this realm are 800 miles high. And here on the sidebar here, you'll see this little picture here. The banyan tree that Lord Shiva meditates underneath is 800, we have this 800-mile height. And here Sariputta is comparing it to this section of Europe. I mean, it's 800 miles from the top, from here, so right from here to here is 800 miles. We have a tree almost as big as Europe, this section of Europe. It's out of sight on these distances. So what does this lead us to think? Well, when modern scholars they look at this stuff and they think, well, they just reject this as mythological. These ludicrous exaggerations. Why are these people talking like this? They must not have known anything. Now, Sariputta's analysis of this mentality, I think, is very insightful. He mentions that even a common primitive man can tell that earthly mountains aren't that big. I mean, geez, you can look over them and see the stars. If they're that big, the entire sky would be blotted out, right? Then he also mentions that if you look at the other portions of the Bhagavatam, they're very highly sophisticated philosophical discussions come throughout the Bhagavatam. So these people writing the Bhagavatam, whoever wrote it, wherever this comes from, it's not from some, primitive person who had no understanding or no knowledge. So he leads this third point here. He suggests in this book that these sizes refer to an actually existing world that is built on the scale of the solar system. And of course, the scale of the solar system comes from the fact that Bhumandala covers the entire diameter, almost the entire diameter of the universe, and it's 4 billion miles, which is the orbit of Uranus. So that's the hypothesis that he's going on here. So we're going to look at, just very briefly here, he looks at a Saptadweep. That's the inner 1/10 of Bhumandala, but it's where a lot of the action is, Saptadweep. So we kind of hone in on that. Here's a little picture of it, multicolored picture. You can see right in the middle there, you can hardly see it, but that's Mount Meru and Jambudweep, which is the central island. And then we have these series of rings and oceans. Okay, there's 6 more rings and 7 oceans, and each ocean surrounding, each ring doubles as you go out, doubles in width. You can see them getting bigger and bigger, right? Each ocean surrounding the ring is the same width as the ocean. So it's an interesting pattern here. So this is Saptadweep, okay? Now we're going to focus in now on that central island of Jambudweep. So we're looking now at Jambudweep. It's a home, which is where Mount Meru is perched. You can see it here. It's a disc-shaped island. It's described as being basically round, 800,000 miles in diameter. That's huge. The Earth has a diameter of 8,000 miles. So, it's way bigger. Just to compare, we have the diameter of the sun in modern terms is about a little bit bigger, 865,000 miles. And then we have this Meru, this huge mountain, 672 miles high. Now you notice, of course, this is divided into 9 varshes. Okay, we have Bardovarsh down here. It's in one class. The other 8 varshes are in a separate class, and it's called Baumaswarga. So these top 8 varshes that are kind of highlighted here are the 8. Baumaswarga means 8 earthly heavens. And here, this is not something we recognize here on our planet. The inhabitants live for 10,000 years. They have bodies like thunderbolts and the strength of 10,000 elephants. So these are superhumans. We don't really see them in our everyday life. So we're down to Bardovarsh, and you can see out of this little picture. It's got the little arrow right here. This little section here is, it's like a little what's that called? A little curved section here is Bardovarsh. It's also referred to as the field of fruitive activities. Now it's beginning to sound like home a little bit, right? Field of fruitive activities. And this is the only part of Bhumandala that's at all reminiscent of the Earth. And in Prabhupada's books, he identifies this word, this term, Bardovarsh, this particular tract of land, sometimes as the entire Earth and sometimes just as India. So that makes it a little problematical. This mountain range just north, it cuts this varsha off, Jambudvip, from the other 8 varshas. It's called the Himalayas, has the same name as the Himalayas in India. The interesting thing is they're 80,000 miles high. And this distance of that in between the mountains and the ocean, which is the area of Bardovarsh, is 72,000 miles in length. Okay. So Sariputta notes that it originally referred to the whole Earth, but by the process of political fragmentation, meaning the emperors and originally ruled the entire Earth, but gradually their kingdom boiled down to India, and so it came to mean India alone. Okay. So, and now we're going to start to really parse this stuff, and Sariputta, this is what he says. This naturally leads us to ask, what is the relationship between the Earth of our experience and this Jambudvip and Bardovarsh as described in the Bhagavatam? And I have this wonderful document in the archives that Sariputta wrote out by hand. Don't have a date on it. It was clearly done sometime before he wrote, penned the book Vedic Cosmography. He was trained as an artist, and so he draws out in this. I just took a shot of one page out of it, where he's looking pictorially, he's visualizing what different ways you can think of the Earth planet and how it relates to Bardovarsh. So he starts with that little, I love this one, he has a little, he calls this the Payala mode model, so you have this little semicircle, maybe it's just the northern hemisphere sitting on top of this Bardovarsh. This is Himalaya Mountains here, this peak right here. And then he actually looks at the famous so-called golf ball model, that somehow the Earth is perched up somewhere on some kind of stem-like thing. Here he has actually Mount Meru going, it's the Himalaya Mountains here, going right through the middle of the Earth. Then he looks at, well, maybe it's part of this whole mountain range, maybe it's stuck onto there. And this is one of my favorite ones down here. This is actually used by Sulabha in his model, where he looks at Bardovarsh as the entire Earth, and he has the continents down here. You see these little continents are the islands that were carved up by the sons of Sagar, if you remember that section of the Bhagavatam. So he looks at all those as possibilities. What is this thing? Let's look at it from various points of view. So he basically, Sariputta mentions in this book, he's going to take it for granted that the planet on which we live our daily lives can be thought of as a globe of 8,000 miles in diameter. Okay. So, but there's definitely a sense, when you read this Puranic stuff, that the Earth is not a globe. Okay. So he makes this very interesting, and this is a nice way to look at it. He proposes that we look at the cosmological system of the Bhagavatam as a simplified description of the universe as it appears from the viewpoint of the demigods and the rishis and highly elevated human beings, who actually, if you read the Bhagavatam, they are the principal characters in the work. They're not talking about, people like you and me. We don't rate mentioned in the Bhagavatam so much. So that's one we're going to look at it through that lens. Um, and if you look at it like that, you have the Earth of the Bhagavatam is the Diska Bhumandala, but only a small portion of this Earth is accessible to the limited senses of modern day human beings. He makes the point that maybe not so 5,000 years ago, or 500,000, 5 million years ago. Mars Yudhisthira, if you read some of his pastimes, he travels through the different Varshas quite a bit. So he had access to the regions, those Varshas, the Bhuswarga. Dhruva, if you read the pastimes of Dhruva, he clearly has access to the entire Bhumandala because he visits the different dweepas. So we're looking at it from that point of view, different access according to different situations. Now we're getting into the meat, if I can use that phrase, of this chapter. And this is one thing, look at this picture, and I just want you to kind of get this into your mind's eye. It's a real simple picture that's going to give you the three basic planes of astronomy. So Sariputta asked question one. He has three questions. Question one, where is this disk located? We have this big disk, 4 billion miles across. We don't see it looking around. If it were tangible, you wouldn't see any stars in the southern hemisphere if you live in the north and vice versa. But it's not blocking the stars. So what is this thing and where is it? So naturally, the first thing he's going to look towards are the three classic planes used in astronomy, because this is a section on cosmology. So we're going to look at the three cosmological planes. If you can kind of keep this picture in mind as we go through this, I think a lot of things are going to become fairly clear. So you have to kind of think a little bit like an astronomer. So the first one we're going to look at actually that he looks at is the horizontal plane. Horizontal plane is real simple. You walk outside your door. You're living in Utah in the Salt Flats, so you have a 360 degrees vision of your horizon. And if you spin around, you're going to see you're on a big flat round disk, right? That's a horizontal plane. That's what the Earth looks like to you. So that's a horizontal plane. And this little guy in here, I love this. I got this from Ali Gopal. This little stick figure, that's the observer. So he now, as an observer, when you step outside your door, you're the center of your universe. And that's the horizontal plane. You're in the middle. And so now, if you look, so what's Mount Meru? Well, it becomes your spinal column. This is, we're getting into the Kundalini stuff. So as an observer, horizontal plane, you're in the center of the universe. Your spinal cord becomes the Mount Meru. Now we're going to look at the equatorial plane, celestial equator, equatorial plane. That's the spin. This is where the Earth spins. That's the axis. The Earth spins around the north and south poles. The equator lies on the plane of the. It's called the equatorial plane of the celestial equator. So that's a very fundamental plane in any kind of astronomy. This has nothing to do with modern or ancient. Every astronomer, beginning from the earliest writings we have up to the most modern, are working with these three planes. You use the celestial coordinates or the equatorial plane for anything to do with geography. All your longitude, latitude lines, your GPS systems, they all tie in. Oh, your daily life, because this is the daily spin of the Earth. It's 24 hours. The Earth is spinning along this plane, and our daily lives pretty much go along with this thing. Now we're going to look at the ecliptic plane. And this is nicely done here. You have the little sun here. The ecliptic plane is the apparent path of the sun through the sky. That's called the ecliptic plane. You can see it's at a tilt here, fixed tilt between the celestial, the equatorial plane and the ecliptic plane, approximately 23 and a half degrees. And this clearly, this ecliptic plane is used for astrology, basically, because in astrology you want to know how the sun goes straight through the belt of the zodiac, and so what you're looking at here is how far where the planets are situated along the belt of the zodiac or the ecliptic plane. And this obviously ties into the solar system because it's about the movements of the planets vis-a-vis the background of stars. So those are your three planes. And now we're going to see how Sariputta goes through those. Before he starts on that, though, he gives this is a beautiful analogy. We're trying to understand the concept of higher dimensionality. It's a little bit iffy. The term does not show up anywhere in the Puranas. He borrowed the term from mathematics. So Bhumandala is located somewhere in space, but it's higher dimensional. What does that mean? And this is a wonderful analogy, the office party. So you have an address you want to go to, you're in Manhattan, you want to go to the office party, you jump in your Uber guy, you give the guy the address, he drives you right to that exact address, you step out and you look and you go, I don't see any office party here. You walk inside, it's just an entrance hall. It's like nothing's going on. I was cheated, but you forgot. You gotta go up. The office party, you didn't know maybe, but it's on the 20th floor. Well, you got to get in the elevator. The elevator represents that higher dimensional travel. You have to get up off that two-dimensional thing. In this case, we're going to a three-dimensional spot. So you finally figure it out. You get in the elevator, you go to the 20th floor, you step out. Now you're going the horizontal direction, but you're on the 20th floor. There you are. You got your office party. So that's a wonderful example. I love that analogy. Okay, now he's going to start looking at which one of these planes we're going to look at, and the first thing he comes across is this amazing book written in 1969, Hamlets Mill, an essay investigating the origins of human knowledge and its transmission through myth. This is a seminal work done by Giorgio Santillana, who was he was a noted MIT historian and philosopher of science, and he collaborates with Hertha von Dechen. She's a German scientist who also would teach and research at MIT during this period. She was there from, I think, 1960 to 1966. And they collaborated and they looked at ancient so-called myths, so ancient cultures, through the eyes of astronomy. No one had really done that in the West before, that at least that I'm aware of. Maybe some people had, but this is the first, major work done on that. And it's quite astounding when you look at these so-called mythology through the eyes of an astronomer. You come up with a very different picture of things. And his picture was, this isn't myth, this is astronomy. And so he distills out of all these ancient cultures two different visions of the earth that they clearly all used. One he calls the earth, in quotes, or sometimes the wet earth, which is the ideal plane laid through the ecliptic. Okay, so that's the ecliptic plane, the solar system. Then he also distilled out a concept of the Earth called the dry Earth, which is the ideal plane going through the celestial equator. So this is, it's a book worth reading. If anyone's interested, I do have a PDF. You can email me and I can send you a copy of that. And just for fun, Sariputta brings in a couple of cross-cultural connections. He does a lot of that throughout his work. And I love this little drawing because he's showing that these, ancient myths, there is a common thread through all this. And this is a Mayan wood carving of some kind. And you can look at it and you'll see, oh, this is the churning of the ocean of milk pastime. Here's Korma, our huge turtle. Here's Vishnu. It doesn't look too much like Vishnu, but he's holding the churning rod, a Mandara mountain. This is Vasuki, the snake going down either side. And then you have the demons over here pulling one end and the demigods over here pulling the other end. So that's just a little aside. He calls it a historical interlude. Here's another couple of cross-cultural links. Here's the Norse picture of the universe. Boy, here's Mount Meru, here's the big tree. Here's the Bhumandala, circling around. We have the sky above and the, cosmic waters beneath. Dogon has a very similar kind of universe. Mount Meru here is, it's called Amma's Pillar. It's the world axis. Here's our Bhumandala surrounded by an ocean. The serpent surrounding all that. And here's a more recent, this is the 1500s, first polar map ever made. This is done by Mercator. And I just love it because it's so similar to some of our pictures of Jambudweep. Here's a mountain actually in the middle at the North Pole. Mercator puts a mountain. We have the four rivers, which are the branches, the Ganges, streaming from out of that mountain. Here's these little land masses reminiscent of Jambudweep and then surrounded by the salt ocean right here. So I thought those were kind of interesting. Now, in order to get across this idea that Sadhaputta is trying to get at, which is that the earth of our experience somehow links in with this earth, big, massive plane of Bhumandala. And he does this, several times. He brings in this, he calls it the principal correspondence, but it's just right out of Niels Bohr's correspondence principle that he's famous for back in the 1920s when he was first starting. This whole quantum mechanics thing was starting up. And Niels Bohr saw right away that theory can get ahead of itself and actually wind up into the land of fantasy if it's not tied down to observation. And so from the get-go with his researchers, he crafted this correspondence principle. Any new theory or any new description of nature must agree with the old where the old gives correct results. In other words, you can't just take your theory and run away with it and go off into fantasy land. You have to tie it down to the old theory. Correct results means it agrees with observation. So when your old theories agree with observation, you have to agree with the old theory. So where do you apply your new theory? Well, that's at anomalies. When somehow the old theory can't explain something, now you can bring in your quantum mechanics. And this principle of correspondence, I think, was beautifully described by Radhika Raman, Ravi Gupta, at our conference we did, the BIHS 2019 Consciousness and Science Conference. And here's a quote from his talk. So direct meanings, that's the old theory, that's classical physics. Direct meanings are always preferred. We want the simple version, right? Direct meanings are always preferred. But indirect meanings, sometimes non-literal meanings, can be used in particular circumstances. And what are those circumstances? Well, one of them is when the direct meaning is implausible because it does not match with our observation of the world. This is a rephrasing, actually, of Niels Bohr's correspondence principle, put in terms that are meaningful to us today. And the way Sadhaputta then, the way he works this thing is he's going to try linking the domain that's described in the Vedic literature, particularly right here in this fifth canto, with our familiar Earth globe. So that's kind of the strategy that we are doing as Sadhaputta is investigating this Purana cosmology. These are the strategies that he's using. And then he gives some examples. I'm not going to read through these because of time considerations, but if you go to that and read this third chapter in Vedic Cosmography and Astronomy, you'll see a bunch of examples. The one I highlighted is one of my favorite pastimes. It's delightful. We have this beautiful image of it done by one of the ISKCON authors. I'm not sure, I can't read it, and maybe someone knows who did that one. But this is the pastime of sacrifice of Daksha. He insulted, offended Lord Shiva. Shiva threw down a hair and created this beautiful, this impressive fiery demon, Virabhadra, I think is his name. Maybe I don't have it exactly right. Who rushed into the sacrifice, grabbed the axe that was going to cut off the goat's head and cut off Daksha's head. So anyway, very dramatic pastime, but it took place at the confluence of the Ganges and the Yamuna. So Sadhaputa's showing that there's some tie-in with this cosmic pastime, which is beyond anything we can see here on Earth, but it's tied into this particular place in the Yamuna. This is a very, I think this quote here from 5:1711 purport, so this is Prabhupada. He gives this same example. He says, Bauma Swarga, which is those other 8 varshas outside of Jamadweep, is sometimes accepted as the attractive land in Bardovarsh, known as Kashmir. So the other 8 varshas are certainly way beyond. They're 80,000. You have to cross an 80,000 mile high mountain in order to get there. But there seems to be a link in with this land known as Kashmir. That's from Prabhupada. Oh, and he gives another, I didn't write it down in the PowerPoint, but he gives another really good example. Let me read this to you real quick. This is from Srimad Bhagavatam 3:21-25 in the purport. And Prabhupada says, there are many places on the surface of this earth which are also known in the higher planetary systems. Then he adds, we have places on this planet like Vrindavan, Dwarka, and Mathura, but they are also eternally situated in Krishna Loka. So Prabhupada gives, he's indicating here that we have access points to higher level places right here on this planet. And I think it's and it's an important point. And Sadhuputta uses it, sometimes called a portal. The idea of portals comes up in all ancient cultures have these places where you go to a certain place, and from that place, then you can access something in a some higher level of reality. Um, okay, and another quote, real quick. This is also from the Srimad Bhagavatam 4:21-12 purport. Prabhupada says, Saptadweep refers to the 7 great islands or continents on the surface of the globe: Asia, Europe, Africa, North America, South America, Australia, and Oceania. Oceania, that's how we pronounce it. So here again, here Prabhupada's doing the same thing. We have these islands, but they somehow correspond or tie in or link to the continents on this planet. So let's move right along here. Sadhuputta does a quick, brief analysis, a very important one, showing that the Bhagavatam does accept the concept of planets as globes in space. Although in the Bhagavatam, you're not going to see the Earth referred to much at all as a globe. They certainly hint at it in various places. Here's 2. This is the most famous one Sadhuputta uses a lot, 521, 8-9. And if you read this carefully, you'll see it only works on a globe. People living in countries at points diametrically opposed, which would mean straight through, you just drop a line straight through the middle of the globe, right? Diametrically opposed, diametrically opposite. So when they see the sun first rising, the diametrical person will see it setting. And the person, diametrically opposed, if it's midday here, at the opposite side, it'll be midnight. That only works on a globe. Okay, so Sadhuputta uses that a lot to show that Srimad Bhagavatam, the narrator here in the description, is clearly aware that the planet is a globe. And there's another quote here, which I won't read through. Then we also have a Prabhupada and Chaitanya Charitamrita referring to the planets as dvipas. Okay, so the last quote, he referred to the planets as continents. Here, he's suggesting the planets are the dvipas. So we're getting several connections here, which I think is really actually kind of exciting. Okay. Now we're getting into the models. Now, the first model that Sadhuputta discusses is this macrocosm, microcosm concept. That's the Hermetic philosophy. It's been around since, time immemorial. As it is above, so it is below. So this is, if you recall, this is our yogi. This is the horizontal plane. Here's our yogi. He's standing in the middle of his universe. And he has these chakras that go up his spine. This is Ashtanga Yoga, right? And so these chakra points, and this is all over the place. You can go anywhere on the internet. You'll see this Sadhuputta kind of, I think it was a fairly new idea back in 1990 when Sadhuputta did his work. But the different chakras tie into the different lokas. Murali Gopal has done a lot of work on this concept. And we have presentations by him, which we can share if you're interested. Highlighting this kind of thing. He has the yogi going up to these different chakras. You get to a certain, let's say you want to go to Swargaloka, when you go up, this is like going up Mount Meru, right? And now that's where you stop, and now you astral project, or whatever you want to call it, out horizontally, and now you're experiencing Swargaloka. And you can go up Maharloka, you go up to this chakra point, now you're at Maharloka, et cetera, et cetera. So this is the horizontal plane. Okay, now he takes a little digression, and he asks this important question, and this is the $64,000 question. Is the Bhagavatam giving a metaphorical description of the universe? And if so, then how far can we go in giving indirect interpretations to its statements? And I hope all of you here will tune in to our cosmology conference that's coming up in November, because we're devoting an entire day with some experts in hermeneutics and epistemology coming in to discuss this very issue. So we're trying to understand what the Bhagavatam is saying, especially cosmology is tricky. How far can we go? That's really the issue. And Sadhuputta makes this very astute observation, and he throws it out there. Okay, here it is. Whenever we read a statement and arrive at some understanding of it, this is any statement we read and we're going to understand it, we are necessarily interpreting it in the context of many underlying assumptions. And once we get this straight in our head, okay, so we're reading it, we're understanding it, we have to interpret it, we have a context, whether we like it or not, we've got one. We all have a worldview, and it's passing through that whether we like it or not. And thus, and here it is, this is bolded here, a literal reading of a text is also an interpretation. You got to keep that in mind. And then he adds this, and it may be an incorrect one. So keep this in mind again as we go through all this cosmology. These are the issues that we're dealing with. They aren't simple. Okay, now we're going to get into the two main models. We had the horizontal plane, the yogi being the Batman being the spine. Now we're getting to the two main models that Satiputta discusses, and indeed the ones that are discussed by almost all researchers on the topic. The first is the planosphere model. This is a model that's been used throughout the subcontinent of India, traditionally by the Jyotisha scholars, because it shows up in the Siddhartha. So we have this Bhavatam with this, fast plane, 4 billion miles across. But in the Surya Siddhanta, they're using same kind of terminology, but they take Mount Meru as the North Pole, and in the Surya Siddhanta, I think it's just 1 yojana high. So it's a little mountain like there on the Mercator map, right? A little mountain right there marking the North Pole, right? And then in the commentaries on the Surya Siddhanta explains, this is by Bhaskaracharya, translated by Bhakti Siddhanta, that the southern, in the southern hemisphere, we have the other 6 dweepas, and the other 6 oceans are mapped down here. And you can see it here. This is the famous Jaising ball. This is shows it in 3 dimensions as the 2-dimensional ramification. But here we have Jambudweep is here on this top part. The whole northern hemisphere is Jambudweep. The southern hemisphere is the rest of the rings. And here we have a quote from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. This is from his Anubhashya of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Most learned astronomers have stated that Jambudweep embraces the whole northern hemisphere, lying to the north of the Salt Sea. That's this part here. And the other 6 dweepas and 7 seas are all situated in the southern hemisphere. So this is substantiated by our Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. And here, this is I wanted to show you this little, it's a little diagram of how you make a polar projection, because it really highlights an essential feature of the whole business. So the way you do it is we're trying to take Radha Mohan has a beautiful, if you come to the conference, you'll see this beautiful visual he does where he just takes the Earth globe and flattens it out to the planisphere, and you see it done. It's just it clarifies the whole thing. I don't have that right now, so I'm just using this little diagram to show that a polar projection, it takes any point on this globe and projects it onto a plane that's tangent to the North Pole. So you can see that plane just skims along the top of the North Pole, and so the North Pole maps to the North Pole, and then all the other points spread out, and you get a flat map called a polar projection map. But the interesting thing, and this is what you really need to notice, is this plane of projection, this green line here, is parallel to the equator, which is this red line right here. So they're parallel, and it's very close to it. These are just 500 yojanas apart, which in terms of cosmic distance is, a stone throw. It's just right there. And Satiputta here in this section explains how you can do a projection if you're a mathematician. It's easy. If it's not, you want to ask a mathematician to do it. But you can do this projection in such a way that the path of the sun in Pushkara Dweep maps to the Tropic of Capricorn, which would be right here, just below the equator. That the 6 dweepas surrounding, we'll go back here, the 6 dweepas map to the southern hemisphere, and the equator cuts the salt ocean in half. So we wind up Jambudweep up here, and the base of Mount Meru maps to the Arctic Circle. So this is a very, very useful way to look at to look at the Earth. But as you can see, just keep this in mind that this is be the equatorial plane here, and the plane projection of a planisphere are basically almost the same. Okay, we'll get to that in a bit. Okay, so we have the planisphere model, but there's a problem, and King Pritchett brings this up in this another famous verse, 5:22:1. So he's been listening to this whole description by Shukadev, and he inquires, "My dear Lord, you have already affirmed the truth that the supremely powerful sun god travels around Dhruvaloka." Okay, that's the pole star. That's that thing right up above the axis of the Earth, right? With both Dhruvaloka and Mount Sumeru on his right. Yet at the same time, you say the sun god faces the signs of the zodiac and keeps Meru and Dhruvaloka on his left. How can we reasonably accept, bringing in our Anuman here, we want to be reasonable, how can we reasonably accept that the sun god proceeds with Sumeru and Dhruvaloka both on his right and left simultaneously? So this confusion in the Bhagavatam is not just us. The perfect listener, Parikshit Maharaj, is having this issue. Why first you say it's right, now you say it's left. What's going on? And so Shukadev Goswami clearly answers with the potter's wheel analogy. Okay, so when you have I think we can see it here. Yeah, so when you have a potter's wheel, okay, so potter's wheel is spinning real fast as he's making his pots, and that spinning of the potter's wheel is the familiar daily motion. Here's a little picture I got from Murali Gopal. Here's Dhruvaloka here. All the planets and stars are connected by ropes of wind, and they're spinning around lickety split for 24 hours, complete circuit. This is incredibly fast. 1,000 miles an hour is what it turns out if you're on the surface of the Earth. You're moving along at a frantic clip of 1,000 miles an hour. At the same time, he says there's little ants. You see the little ants on this plate? This plate is Bhumandala here. It's a potter's wheel. You have little ants, and they're walking around. They're oblivious to this incredibly fast spinning plate. They're just doing their thing, walking around, going where they have to go. And that corresponds to the proper motion of the sun and the planets. And here's a picture of it goes counterclockwise, the opposite direction. So that's the right and the left. So this is going. So now you're going to have in the proper motion, you're going to see Sumeru is going to be to the sun god's left because he's going this way, right? Here it's to his right because he's going that way. So and so this takes a year for the sun. For the sun, it's a yearly trek as it goes through. And here's a little video. And as it goes through, of course, it's going through since it's going on the ecliptic by definition, it's going through the zodiac. I want to see if this will play. Let's see if I can get this to play here.
Sariputa's video?
No, this is a little video I got online. Watch this thing. It's really cute because in case you're not real familiar with the ecliptic plane, look at this. This is the sun. You see the sun, the bright thing? It's dashing along through the zodiac, and see the little planets or all the other little moving things. They're going kind of along with the sun, but doing their own thing. But you notice how they're always also close to the zodiac. Let's play that again real quick, just because it's cool. So watch the sun here. This is the sun moving through the sky on the ecliptic plane, passing through all the houses, and the little planets are zipping around, but they always stay real close to the plane and fairly close to the sun. So that's kind of a nice image. I think I like that one anyway. That's right.
See the reversal there.
You could do it backwards.
No, I mean where it's on the left and the right.
Oh yeah. Thank you. That's good. I hadn't noticed that. Now I've got to get rid of this thing. Let's see how I do it. Oh, maybe. How do I get rid of this? I'm going to get rid of this and go back to my. Okay. Here we go. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Christina. Okay. So we got that down. Here's another little picture I really like. This is a whole, no motion here in this one, but this is called the belt of the zodiac. And this little thing down the middle, here's the sun right here. No, it's not. That's a star. But anyway, this little thing right down the middle is the ecliptic plane. This is the path of the sun, cut straight through the zodiac, right in the middle. And then all your planets who stay close to the sun by definition, by their nature, are always going to be found along this zodiac somewhere, and that's what astrology is. Where is that planet at a certain time in a certain place?
Geocentric view.
It's a geocentric view. Here's your Earth right in the center. Yeah. Okay, so as Sariputta then says very explicitly, the successive parts of Bhumandala visited by the sun must correspond to the successive parts of the zodiac lying along the ecliptic. So that now we're getting our head into this headspace of the Vedic version of what are people thinking. This is how they're thinking of our universe in this way. Now this is interesting. Sariputta doesn't take this little foray in mysteries, but in cosmography, Vedic cosmography and astronomy, he looks at the celestial equator as a projection of Bhumandala. He does not, in this chapter, refer to that horizontal plane thing that he does with the yogis being the celestial equator. But I think when you look at it from this angle that we're looking at it here, we can see that in one sense, the horizontal plane is corresponding to the celestial equator. The problem that Sariputta encountered, it's a legitimate problem, is that, and here's a nice diagram I got from Charenu's model back in 2009. She used the celestial, the equatorial plane as Mount Meru, but the problem is you can see here, this is the equatorial plane here. She had it as the floor, actually. She suggested we do that as the floor of the TOVP. But now we have the trek of the sun, the equatorial plane, going up at this, pesky angle. And the Bhagavatam clearly says that the chariot wheel of the sun god rolls along the top of Manasotra mountain, and it's just skimming the surface of Bhumandala. So how do we get this height? How do we get this thing? And as Sariputta mentions, the sun's going to spiral up and down over the course of a year. So how do we deal with that? He gave up and said, I'm not going to deal with it. I'm not going to use this model. But I just wanted to add this in at the very end, because this is another far out video. Prem Guranga is working on a model that is basically using the Bhumandala as very close to the equatorial plane. Here we have it. It's 3.7 something angle difference. You can see here's the Bhumandala, and here's the equatorial plane. Now watch this video, and what you're going to watch, you can see this track up here, this vertical thing is the spiral path of the sun. He actually did a video where you can see the sun spiraling up. So watch this one. This I think will really help. I think really helps to visualize this problem of the sun. Now watch this. Watch the yellow disk. So the yellow disk is the sun. Okay, now watch how it goes. So it's going around up. See how it's spiraling? It's going up in a spiral. It's creating a spiral, and you're going to see it's going to reach the top, spiraling, and when it gets to the top, bingo! You see how it merges in. There you go. So now I have to get rid of this thing. You know how to do this, Christina.
Have our Christina.
Yeah, this might. There we go. Okay, so I just wanted to show that this idea of the celestial of the equatorial plane, Sariputta did not develop that, but many others have. Or several other of our researchers have been developing this model, and so I think that's pretty far out. I wanted to mention that, but Sariputta doesn't, and so he ends the chapter with this very pithy conclusion. And I think we will not, any of us after seeing this will have trouble agreeing with it. Here we tentatively propose that the fifth canto of the Bhagavatam is presenting a combined description of the two types of solar motion. Bhumandala is being used as the underlying framework in each description. So we have the daily motion along the equatorial plane, and the yearly motion along the ecliptic plane. So Bhumandala is being used as the underlying framework in each description, and thus a contradictory picture of its position seems to emerge. Thank you very much for listening. All glories to Prabhupada, Hare Krishna. If you have any questions after all that, please feel free to ask.
All right. Thanks very much, Prishni. If you want to unshare your screen.
Yes, I do. So stop share. I did that. There you go, all by myself. And how do I get my face off this thing? You gotta get me off of this, Christina. Right. There you go. Okay. Look at her pretty face.
Yeah, so if anyone has any questions, please, you can speak up, or you can put your questions in the chat, or you can raise your hand.
Can we project everyone onto the main screen?
Just get rid of me.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to do that because when I'm talking, you know.
No, that's
Yeah.
of course.
But I'm going to be off that big screen there. There we go. Thank you. No, all the way off.
Any hands raised? Well, let people online go first. I have some questions.
We have some chats, maybe.
No, we don't have any questions from folks out there right now. Somebody did ask about the conference in November, but I answered that in the chat.
Oh, okay.
So yeah,
And Prem Gurunga's here. That's nice.
Oh, Hare Krishna.
Um, a question that may not know, but the current theory in science put forth by a Japanese guy, what's his name, and Brian Greene and others, the string theory, which they finally went from 26 dimensions to 10 dimensions required
Okay.
to do the math. So my question is, do you know of any comparison between the modern view of multi-dimensions and what we're talking about here?
In modern view of multi-dimensions and what we're talking about here. That's an excellent question, Brahma. I don't think, at least in this section, that in Vedic Cosmography, Sadhaput is referring to that. He actually talks about higher dimensional in two different ways. And the way that it's usually used by Prabhupada in the Bhagavatam that I can see is that there are multiple levels of reality, each with its own three-dimensional continuum. So when you read descriptions of the heavenly planets, not that they are in 10 dimensions, they have a three-dimensional world. They have chariots, they have beds, they eat supper, they, do all the normal things, and the descriptions of their weapons and their helmets and their flowers are all the same as ours. So it's not that there's more dimension, not experiencing more dimensions. They have a three-dimensional continuum up, height, width, and length like we do, but it's just in a higher level of reality. So mostly I think that's what Sadhaputta does.
Okay.
He does, however, if anyone wants to get into this, and I don't do this myself, but he does have and I could dig this up if anyone's interested. He actually does a little video, I think you've seen it, Brahma, where he does the arms, I think it's the arms of Banasur, how he shows that if you actually can get into higher dimensional math, you can accommodate those 1,000 arms of Banasur working 500 bows simultaneously by looking at that higher dimensionality.
The million heads of Brahma.
Same thing with the million heads of Brahma. So there's I can't do that kind of math.
Okay. No hands raised. I'll ask another one. This is Purushottam a month, so we're all many of us reading the 15th chapter of the Gita, and it begins with this banyan tree with its roots up and down. Does Sadhaput ever talk about, or you know anything about the relationship of the banyan tree to the tree at the north, the tree at the center of Bhumandala?
There's the banyan tree actually shows up on one of the four mountains around Sumeru.
Yeah.
And we have the banyan tree. He does not discuss that. It is discussed, and we're going to have a talk that brings that up in the conference. One of our talks is going to discuss that very thing. And what what does a banyan tree mean? That it has its branches, its roots upward and its branches downward, and it actually ties in very beautifully with astrology. At least that's how it's the only explanation I've seen of that is from the point of view of an astrologer. And it says you're going through the various cardinal points. So, the Bhagavatam there's another way to look at it. We're going to get some really interesting views if you come to the conference. Please do try to tune in. Other views of these descriptions from a more astrological point of view, where these different mountains become the cardinal directions, and they refer to, and the other thing is you have the different things referring to the equinoxes and the solstices. So when you start looking at Bhumandala from that point of view, the banyan tree becomes very significant because you're going through, you're making a shift. So you're having the roots and the branches going the opposite directions as you make a shift through either one of the equinoxes or a solstice. So, but that's out of my league.
Finally, with their hands raised. This is a question that is often asked. I know Sariputta directly asked many times, why don't I see Mount Meru?
A lovely question. And if Radha Mohan is here, I'm going to turn that. Is he still here? Radha Mohan, are you here?
I am here, although
Okay.
I'm actually just walking around.
Well, can you answer that question? Because you are really good at that kind of thing. So why don't we see Mount Meru? You mind answering that for me?
Okay, I mean, the best, can you hear me? I mean, obviously, it suffices to say that our senses, we have 5 senses, don't we? And any instruments we have, whether probes in space or whatever, telescopes and so forth, are ultimately extensions of our 5 senses. Ultimately, that's what they are. And obviously, Mount Meru is a high dimensional thing. Now, interestingly enough, Prabhupada could see Mount Meru and actually could see it, I think, when he was actually in an airplane flying over, I think, Switzerland or something like that in the Northern Alps there. So, and that's really interesting. That's fascinating because it's not even flying over the Himalayas or Kashmir or the Pamir Mountains. It's actually flying over Switzerland in Central Europe, and they could see Mount Meru, and they described it to his disciples from the plane that they could not see it. So this is something which is a tangible thing, which can be viewed according to consciousness. The demigods can see it, and those in the higher degrees of consciousness, just like, for example, I think Prabhupada at the Bhaktivedanta Manor, incidentally, where I'm near at the moment, by the way, Prabhupada could see ghosts. There's a lot of ghosts in England because there's a lot of history. And Prabhupada he used to see ghosts at Bhaktivedanta Manor, and he used to talk to them and shoo them away. Of course, his disciples were just like, what's going on here? So, someone who's in a high level of consciousness can basically be able to see subtle matter. I think that's the best way I can answer that question right now.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Can I say something about that?
Sure. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I'd sort of challenge that higher level of consciousness is the only criteria. I mean, it's like you may have a more powerful set of senses to perceive things. I mean, the ghostly entity, taking this paradigm as something tangible to parse, the ghostly entities see each other and they're not particularly higher consciousness, So
I'm going to respond to that if I could. I just saw this a few days ago. It's a quote from Prabhupada. He actually places, it's quite astounding, but I read it over and over and over again. I can get the reference if you'd like. I don't have it in my head. Where he says the Bhutas, Pretas, Bhutanas, that whole list of these Rakshasas, Yakshas, are on a higher level than human beings. He actually says that.
Yeah, they're on a higher level, but because they have more powerful material abilities, but their consciousness is not necessarily higher. So again, you're using adjectives, and what are the reference points for these adjectives? I mean,
Yeah. Well, maybe the word conscious. Are you taking?
Some could be, higher in the economics, so they're generally not known for having a higher expressing higher consciousness.
And yet they're higher placed in the hierarchy. So maybe consciousness you're thinking is not the best.
There's different hierarchies. There's different, this list is based on this criteria. Another list is based on another criteria. I mean, Casper, the friendly ghost, was a pretty nice guy. I mean, there's probably always anomalies of some, nice ghosts, but generally they're thought of as being like in the lower modes of consciousness. Brahmin Rakshasas, I mean, they're like, beings that are out of their freaking mind, but they have more powerful abilities. So I guess what I'm saying is more important than trying to figure out how to communicate with ghosts necessarily is different entities may have more and less powerful ability to perceive things in the material energy, which may or may not be strictly dependent on their consciousness. Different ordinary animals, according to science, they can perceive electromagnetic energy or this or that, and they're not necessarily more better consciousness than a human being. Maybe they do have better consciousness. So I guess I'm attacking one particular person's interpretation, who's not here on this thing here now, lives on the other side of the world. that it's just higher, you have to have pure consciousness in order to see these things. When the Devas were churning the Milk Ocean with the Asuras. And it wasn't like the Asuras all suddenly went through the Bhakti program and got a degree in Bhakti Shastri in order to go to the Mount Meru and churn the Milk Ocean. All right, that's it. So,
hi Krishna, can I just excuse me, sorry, Stacey, but I think you may have already mentioned it, but I think just in case it hasn't been mentioned, or those that listening in may not be aware, but it's not lost on the fact that ghosts and rakshasas and so forth are listed above the earth, above Bhumandala, very slightly, only by I think a few thousand yojanas or less, and they're stationed between here and Rahu, for example, but they're still higher than us in that sense. I mean, yes, they're lower consciousness, but they're higher along the vertical dimension of the Vedic universe, which is because they've got more power, I guess, although they are, like you said, not necessarily any more spiritual than we are.
Yeah. I'm not saying they're more powerful or higher. I'm just saying I guess I'm not an expert in this, but there's one particular interpretation of those who can see some of these features. They just necessarily is completely dependent on purified consciousness. I'm just suggesting there might be even more complexity than that. The Asuras within many pastimes were negotiating many of these features, like in the churning of the Milk Ocean. They didn't necessarily have a superior consciousness than I'm just suggesting there could be added complexity. And I wasn't necessarily just poking at what you were saying. I wasn't poking at that at all.
No, I didn't take it that way. And also, just as far as the churning of the Milk Ocean is concerned, I mean, the demigods and the Asuras were interacting with each other. They had a shared project, right? That they could see each other, we assume, and as well. So there's something, even though they are lower consciousness, they could access each other in a way that we would simply even not be aware of, I guess.
Here's another one that comes to mind now. I'm rolling with it. When Bali Maharaj overthrows Indra, I mean, they're attacking the heavenly planets and they're taking it over. Let us speak Hiranyakashipu. So it seems like the Asuras are negotiating these higher realms.
I think where we're getting hung up is we're getting a kind of a value-laden concept of consciousness, that if you have a higher consciousness, it means you're more in the mode of goodness. But I think as I'm listening to this discussion, what we're really saying is you have your consciousness has a deeper levels of awareness. It doesn't mean you're good or bad, right or wrong, anything like that. It's just you have more, and I think you were hinting at this, Steve, you have more ability to access more stuff with your particular set of senses that feeds into your consciousness. So so ghosts clearly can do things we can't do. They're shapeshifters. They can take on any shape that they want. They can approach us in dreams. They have all kinds of powers. Putana, can fly in a broomstick. So is there a way that we can connect consciousness? And I think Radhamohan was saying power. So we have power and consciousness. I think they're more, in this case, the consciousness is more connected to power than to purification. I think.
Right. So I think then how to define this how you're categorizing these terms of consciousness within this context. I guess that's what I'm angling here is this is one particular interpretation, at least I've heard in casual, identified with a certain model where it's like you have to be a pure devotee in order to see these things. And to have a more powerful mode of consciousness to interact with the material energy, it sounds like you mean, and blah, blah, blah. Okay, next.
That's such an excellent point, and I think it's something that really needs to be discussed thoroughly. We can do at this conference, because it's obvious. Hiranyakashipu sitting on the throne of Indra. So what does that mean? Is he's more good? You think as you go up, you're getting more in the mode of goodness, but clearly not. We have Rakshasas, Ravana, lowest mode, and yet he's also accessing these higher realms. So what does this mean?
That's considered an anomaly, but nonetheless, there's plenty of pastimes like that as well.
Plenty, and on a daily basis, ghosts, Bhutas, Pretas, they're hovering right above us. Gandharvas, all the Upadevas, the dancing girls, the demigods, and the heavenly planets. Yeah, these are issues. Thank you.
Let's see if there are any other questions. Those on Zoom, And everybody on Zoom, if you'd like to put on your camera for a moment and say hello to Prishni before we conclude. I realize some of you can't do that, but if you do, be nice to see you for a moment. And greet people. Guru Bhakti, very nice to see you here, Doctor. Very good. Who's that waving an iPad?
Someone's waving.
Oh, you're on mute.
Whoever's talking's muted.
Whoever's talking is muted.
Dr. Thomas from Vienna, Austria.
Oh, so
Hare
good
Krishna.
you're here.
Yeah, Hare
Thank
Krishna.
you so much. It was so interesting. I'm looking forward for the conference and all other presentations. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
And Dvija Govinda, nice to see you in Ukraine. We're glad you're well and not yet in the army. So hope all is well with you. We're still praying that somehow or other peace comes and you can come to the conference. And Vinod Kovina, very happy you would join us. Very glad. Radha Mohan, I need to speak to you later. We'll talk about that. Prem Guranga, we even quoted your work today. Do you have any comments?
No, I mean, I was really interested to read this book through, and I think Prishni Mataji has endeavored quite a lot to do this wonderfully. In fact, she was kind enough to send me the links for the lectures that I missed last time. So I'm relishing this. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're very glad you're here, and we had no idea you were coming when you were going to be quoted. It's a good thing. Yeah, that was good.
Yeah,
Who else we have here? What's that?
Abhinanda.
Abhinanda. We are glad you could join us. Where is Abhinanda?
Russia.
Russia. That's right. Oh, Russia. Ah,
Hello, nice to hear from you. It was a wonderful lecture. I enjoyed it very much. You made a very good job of following, presenting Sadhguru book. It's the best we have now. But my idea is it's a little bit like a history of philosophy or Hare Krishna philosophy, and we need some new stuff. Though we have to know, like Sthiti Prabhu, we have to be in. Aware of all the stuff that had been created.
and Abhinanda, same with you. I hope that there's peace soon so you can actually come to our conference. We'd love to have you here. I was just talking to Nari about that. We were corresponding. And
Oh, great! Yeah, at least I'll be visiting by Zoom. That's for sure.
Of course.
Yeah.
But we would actually be so delighted to have you here in person. We're so delighted.
It'll come. someday.
It will. And let me see. We have others. Drew Chung. I don't know if I know you.
Yeah, Drew is a devotee who comes to Krishna House a lot, and yeah, he's a very nice devotee.
Well, Drew, you're at Krishna House, so I'd like to personally give you a tour of the BI if you haven't been here, if you're in Gainesville. So you can arrange that through Christina. Who's Rook? I don't know who Rook is. It's short for Rook something.
Rukmini?
I don't know.
Rukmini's been coming.
A Rook. Well, greetings, Rook.
Is it? Oh wait, there it is. Is that Rukmini?
Yeah.
Okay. So
Oh, Rukmini.
Yeah.
Okay. We're glad you're here. And who's Dana?
Dana K.
Yeah. Trying to.
Hello. Thank you for everything. I really enjoy this so much. So I really appreciate you all. Thank you.
Where are you?
I'm sorry?
Where are you located?
I am in Fernandina Beach, Florida. So I'm about 2 hours from Alachua.
Have you been to the Bhaktivedanta Institute?
I have not, but I'm really interested.
Come for the tour. We're in the main library now.
Oh, I would love to so much. I wish I was closer. I wish I was so closer to all of you.
Please come. Christina, put my email in the chat if you could, and then we can correspond if anybody wants to be more involved with the BI. There's much to do, many books to write. You know, Bob Cohen at ivs.edu. Chaitanya Hari, where are you? Okay. Dandakesha.
Oh, Dandikesh.
Where's Dadikesh?
She's here.
Here. Oh, that's right.
No,
Of course.
Dadikesh. Can
Okay.
you say something to us? There she is.
Yes,
Dadikesh, Hare Krishna. I didn't know you were here.
We're very glad you're here. And I see Krishna Kirtana.
Hare
Where
Krishna.
are you located?
I'm currently in Seattle.
Okay. That's a nice city, actually. Very good. I'm glad you're here. So anybody I missed, I apologize. I just wanted to greet you all. We're trying to be radical personalists here at the BI and get to know all of you. And you're all welcome to visit and tour. We're almost done with our remodeling, I pray. And the email is one word, Bob Cohen. You're all welcome to tour, but this conference coming up is a culmination of many other workshops and seminars we had, and it's bringing it all together, and it's been evolving in ways that are wonderful. We expected a dozen abstracts, got 24 really first-class talks. So you're all invited to participate. We hope some of you would come in person. Guru Bhakti is so overdue for a visit to Gainesville and Alachua, so maybe she'll come. And so all of you are very much invited. But I want to say that of the presentations we've had, close your ears, Prishni, but this is one of the best ones we've had. And I tell you why, because not only did she say what Sariputta said, but Prishni brought it into context. What do other people say about what Sariputta said? Pulling a video from the internet to explain it, enhancing beyond. Because Sariputta, for all his brilliance, wasn't the final word. He gave us a process, and Prishni has demonstrated how that works. So this was a very special lecture. For those who have friends who didn't see it, who think they'll benefit from it, I would suggest this will be posted on our website within a few days, usually.
Oh, yeah, on the YouTube channel.
Yeah, on the YouTube channel. And there's a link on our website
so
to
on the
it
website.
under Media tab. So please feel free to share it. And finally, I'd like everyone to unmute for a moment. You'll see why. Anyone who can, unmute for one moment. And we'll see who's unmuted. And we are going to thank Prishni for this great talk.
Thank you.
Thank you, Prishni.
Haribol.
Thank
Haribol.
Hare Krishna.
Haribol. Hare
Thank you very much
Thank you
for
very
Glories
much.
to all the all glories to all the Vaishnavas.
Thank you. That's a chapter.
All right, can I take us out?
Yes.
Okay. Please join us in 2 weeks on Saturday, August 24th for a presentation on Vedic Cosmography and Astronomy, Chapter 4, called The Vertical Dimension, given by Dr. Vasil Semenov, Duja Govinda Das, who has earned PhD degrees in both in acoustics and computational mathematics. He has been working at the scientific and production enterprise Delta SPE in the area of telecommunications since 1999 and has been teaching Vedic mathematics and other courses in Kiev Krishna Consciousness Academy since 2013. Please visit our YouTube channel, Bhaktivedanta Institute for Higher Studies, which I just posted in the chat, for access to our earlier lectures. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.
Thank you,
Prabhupada.
Christina.
Thank you, Christine.